So thank you everyone. We'll start with the first pitch for today, which is the trustworthy AI solutions that are imperative to benefit humans in societies. This is as part of the Innovation and Commercialization Working Group of GPAI.
Okay, so very warm welcome from my side as well. Andreas Liebel. I was now for a couple of years on the steering committee of GPAI, managing director of the Applied AI initiative in Germany, to really drive the adoption of AI in the industry. What I want to present today is a project that we started in Paris a couple of years ago, with that goal of how to now get regulation into application. And we kind of started working on that the last 1.5 to 2 years. And now it's really about growing that. And now it's also the time where there is regulation coming up. So the question is now how to really get this regulation into application. And the issue is that if you look at kind of around the world, you have a couple of countries with that horizontal regulation. You have some that really go into vertical regulation of AI, and you have some that have non-binding guidelines. And on top of that comes that we have different definitions of AI. We have different applicability of the regulation to specific use cases. So in some countries, some AI cases are regulated and in others not. And then we have the different requirements to comply with that regulation, if you talk about that from a global perspective. And what we did in a couple of years back, I'm very much involved in the European AI Act. We asked the companies how difficult it is for them to comply with the AI Act in Europe. And what you see with the red ones, in most of the cases, actually more than half of the companies said it's really hard because there are no existing processes, there are no best practices, there are no tools for compliance. And that for the own regulation. So if we look at global trade, if we look at companies from outside the own regulations, how to be able to kind of sell products to these markets, there is no globally approachable platform where you can inform yourself about the regulatory requirements around the world. There is no translation from one regulation to the other. And that is what we want to provide within GPAI, and I think really GPAI is the great place to build up that type of translation between the different parts of the regulation. So what we did is, on the one side, we mapped the different regulations around the world. That is a work in progress as the regulations now come up. We collect existing support mechanisms, then eventually also co-develop the missing support mechanisms that we have. And then also give feedback to governments about the requirement, the required support for the own SMEs, and so on. And that is where I would ask your support. So on the one side, it's really on the first ones, we want that to be a global effort. We also talked yesterday around the dinner on the Global South of how to get them on board. And as within GPAI, we now work with a couple of countries, but there is still quite a few more that could join that effort to work on that topic. And then it's about that collection and also development of these tools. And there is a massive effort in education and upskilling of also the experts in the organizations to really be able to comply with the regulation in their own countries, but also globally. And that is where we also would ask for your support, as we really want to build that as a success case for GPAI, so that we promote on the one side the innovation, but also on the other side that compliance with trustworthy AI solutions. And that can also be especially for many countries around the world, a push, a driver for innovation, for economic growth, if you are able to comply with the major global regulations out there. So we want to build up that platform. We want to really work with global organizations on these topics, on the education side, on the collection and the development side of these types of tools, and then ultimately also become that kind of sparring partner for governments and public institutions to how to support their own SMEs in their own country to be able to comply with existing regulation, but also to get into that regulatory learning, because AI is developing so fast, and so needs to be the regulators as well. That was it from my side. Just a very brief overview about what we're doing and what I'm asking for. I'm happy to have your questions.
Thank you. So Andrew Miluzzi from USAID. I'm wondering, among the kind of your survey of the existing support mechanisms, like if you could just give a few examples of ones that you maybe are finding especially promising, and in which contexts?
So, if we just take the example of the AI Act, you have the different requirements on data to reproducibility, stability, and so on. What is happening there is actually at the moment the standardization process going on. If you look at the organizations, they have absolutely no clue where they are. What I like from a global perspective, for example, what NIST is now doing with the kind of provisioning of benchmarking systems, so at least organizations can orientate themselves to get some feedback of how well they are doing. Today Hugging Face developed that kind of compass or guideline on how you're doing with regards to the US regulation. That is what we want to build up in Europe as well. But I would say there is not much of a best practice out there for organizations to really understand how they need to develop and how they need to comply to build these trustworthy AI solutions. So it's really, you go out and you look here for explainability, you go to another place to see what's the best in terms of reproducibility or model tracking or documentation. So there is no overall kind of go-to place to inform yourself. And again, that is for your own regulation. There's absolutely no clear kind of place or platform where you can inform yourself about regulations on other sides of the world.
I'm sorry, I came a little late, so I missed part of the presentation. But in general, my question is based on Prime Minister's remark yesterday as well. Are regulations, first of all, it's a very difficult challenge. It's a challenge of the century, if you tell me, in terms of AI. What's the hope of having regulations, even if it evolves over time, to come through to take care of the responsible people, but also the irresponsible actors as well? How can regulation help, if at all?
Well, from my perspective, I mean, that's a hard question. Obviously, I mean, we need to start with the ones who want to comply with regulation. If we are able to get the industry to develop kind of AI on that more trustworthy level, and I would kind of assume that the regulation has that purpose of really enforcing that certain level of trustworthiness is embedded in the development process of the AI solutions. Then actually we did a massive step forward. So only if you look at the ones who want and can comply to regulation to build better AI solutions. So then still there is a lot of bad actors that simply don't care about regulation, and I think that's a totally different topic that we need to address as well. At GPAI we discuss kind of potential options for watermarking, for other ways of identifying deepfakes and AI generated content. And so that's not so easy. It's in that project only partially addressed. We now really focus on the ones who want to comply and help them to spend the least possible effort to actually get to that level of compliance. Even in my own country, in Germany, if you look at the companies, they maybe have 1 or 2 or 3 people working on AI at all. They have no clue how to do that. And it's a massive cost for the organizations to get that knowledge, to get compliant, and just kind of looking at around the world, there needs to be that support system. It's not that they don't want to develop these systems in that kind of quality level, but it's actually a very high cost for them to investigate, to find the right resources, to find the right processes and approaches, as they are not existent yet.
Do we have time for one more? Okay. Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'm Bhavika from GIZ. So at GIZ, we focus a lot on the long-term sustainability of the initiatives that we support. So have you considered how this initiative will be sustainable, and how will you provide long-term assistance to the SMEs in question?
So the idea is that it's ultimately it's a global platform that really kind of provides also these types of resources in an open source way. I mean, what we are doing in the kind of individual contributors, at least I can talk from my organizations, we will be there for the longer term. I would also assume that GPAI is there for the longer term, but the idea really is to develop that platform, to make it open source, and then to continuously kind of update them in, with the partners that we are working with, as that was in the beginning, the UNESCO, as one of the first organizations that really also want to support that direction. But yes, I mean, the long-term sustainability of the project is key. And in addition, it's the staying up to date. So long-term is not the once kind of publication and that's it, but you need to continuously invest in following up. And that is what we want to do. As said, we now work on that topic for 1.5 to 2 years. Within GPAI, we want to continue, and it's not just for 1 year, but for the longer term, and to build that platform really on a GPAI institutionalized level.
Thank you.
Thank you. Howard Lacuna from the Gates Foundation. Can you help us debunk the view that regulation kills innovation?
Well, yes, I mean, that's the main push that we did also within the AI Act. The surveys that we did is to really support innovation. And what we wanted to show is how hard it is for the innovators to comply, the startups, the SMEs. And they have massive issues. What we also discussed, I was discussing yesterday evening with the minister from India. There is that common understanding that we at some level need to have a certain level of trustworthiness of these solutions. So there is no way around to get to that point. So the question is rather, what's the balance within the regulation on the one side and the innovation on the other. And as said, there are totally different approaches that are all fair. So if you look at Europe, you have that horizontal regulation. If you look at Singapore, India, in parts now also what's being discussed in India, but if you look at Japan, for example, they have the non-binding one. Then you have UK and the US in parts with the vertical regulation. So there are different approaches to that. But they all have in common that there should be some certain level of trustworthiness, let's say, and it's just finding the balance. But if there is that level of trustworthiness, what we need to do is to lower the cost to help the companies to comply as fast as possible with as little resources as possible by providing that support ecosystem to say, if you want to go that direction, then we can help you also to do that in a most efficient way. So it's rather under the assumption that there should be some kind of quality minimum that you need to follow. So let's now help the organizations to get there as fast as possible to actually support the innovation. So trying to find that balance and on the regulatory side to help them to get there.
Great presentation. So what kind of timelines are you thinking about? Because the EU AI Act has already been announced, but in many other countries, it's still very evolving. And to build even trust in a platform like this, you'll need to have a certain level of information available, tools available, before the access can be made trustworthy, right?
Yes, that's a very good question. That's why also in the last 2 years it was very complex to kind of get that whole structure started. I mean, even the definition of AI also within the AI Act changed over time. So if you just look at that from a global perspective and say, how can you compare the definition, what's in the regulation in one country and in the other, that now was very kind of ambiguous in the last years. Now with the AI Act, we have the first one reasonably stable, and we see others now also getting a little bit more stable as well. So I would assume that next year we can really get into that work. But we also have to. I mean, there are small transition times, but also the AI systems get more powerful and more relevant, more applied. So there is also the impact that's potentially higher. And but once it's there, we need to really get started to build up that ecosystem as soon as possible. So from now we had this preparation phase, I would say, and now it's really the kickoff, and we want to develop that as fast as possible now within the next year.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think with that we should proceed to the next presentation for today, Unlocking Responsible AI Data and Model Sharing for Generative AI and Other Applications. This is from, again, our Innovation and Commercialization Working Group. May I request Lee to be pleased?
Great. Thank you so much. I'm Lee Tiedrich from the United States. I'm at Duke University, and I'm going to talk about our Innovation and Commercialization project in the IP Committee, and it's all about unlocking responsible AI data and model sharing. So to set the stage for you, we really are at a crossroads with responsible AI. We want to encourage a lot of innovation, and to do that, we need access to data. We need access to models. We need people to be able to share their models. But we also need to do, and if we do that, we will have more responsible applications. We can have data that will eliminate bias. We can address safety concerns. So there's a lot of good reasons why we want to do this. But on the other hand, when we talk about sharing data, we have to be careful of other concerns. That's the conundrum. We have to make sure that we're protecting privacy. We have to make sure that we're protecting individual rights, commercial rights. So what we did was trying to start a project, and we've been working on this for a couple years, on how can we encourage responsible AI data and model sharing. And what we've seen over the last year with the rise of generative AI, the urgency to find solutions has only escalated. And the premise of our work is that while we need regulations, as Andreas was saying, regulations are not the turnkey solution. And one of the solutions, and we've been working closely with with people all around the globe, is we need the business codes of conduct, which is important with the G7. We need technical tools. How do we create fences around data, protect models? But we also think having standard contract terms can help. Like you look at the content industry, and we have a lot of content sharing through Creative Commons licenses. We have open source agreements with work for traditional software, but we don't have standard contract terms to deal with the world today. So that's really been the premise of our project. And we've been working on this for 2 years, and happy to take questions on it, but the demand is there for the marketplace. We've talked to people all around the globe, and they agree we need contract terms. And just by way of background, before I joined Duke University, I was a corporate lawyer for 30 years, so I lived this, and doing these contracts is really hard. Why us? The bottom line is it's a tough challenge, and nobody else has really stepped up to the plate to solve this other than GPAI. And we started this project a couple years ago, and everybody wants us to do more and more. So it's a real opportunity for us to step in, solve an urgent problem. Another important thing to keep in mind is that this issue is so far beyond big tech. Yes, big tech has their data issues, but when you talk to people in the research community, researchers in universities, they have a hard time getting access to data. Can they scrape data? Those are questions. There's a lot of uncertainty. And then a lot of the work on AI for social good through climate, we need access to the data. We've been hearing throughout whole summit, that data access is really key, and we can unlock it for social good. When you think about our work, we actually, with the standard contract terms, are doing what GPAI's mission is of translating principles into practice. The standard contract terms to get adopted need broad stakeholder communication, collaboration, and that's exactly what we're doing. And as Andreas just explained, we're in a world right now where different countries are taking different regulatory pathways, and if we can come up with these standard contract tools, it's a great way to harmonize. So that's really the proposition behind our work. Bottom line is our committee delivers. We started this project a couple years ago. We did a preliminary report, interviewed people in the community. You can read it up on our website. One of the outcomes that reinforce that basically people aren't tackling this challenge yet is we need to build a global community. So that's what we did in 2023. We hosted 2 hybrid workshops, one in person at the Max Planck Institute in Germany, one at Duke University. We had overwhelmingly broad participation with policymakers, industry, civil society, academia, and people really welcome that, bringing that ecosystem together to help them advance their process. We've also really sharpened our focus on the critical issues of the day. I'm happy to take questions on this, but trust me, as a corporate lawyer, today's open source license agreements don't work for LLMs. So we're trying to tackle that challenge of how do we create license agreements for LLMs. We're taking on the generative AI issue. Who owns the rights to the AI outputs? The laws don't answer it. Contracts can help. Data scraping. So we're really there at the front line. We've produced a report in 2023 with the outcomes of our 2 workshops. We have a blog post, and the plan for 2024, share the vision with us, is we want to create the AI contract term incubator. We already have this great community that we've built, and we want to continue to nurture it and empower organizations to develop these contract terms. So if we got additional funding, we could increase the amount of workshops that we are producing. We could build websites to make these terms, make this information accessible to SMEs, to governments, to everybody who's trying to capitalize on responsible AI. With additional funding, we could get staffing to help with the thought leadership. If you look at our reports and you look at our workshop outlines, we spend a lot of time curating the discussions, curating the community. We can do more with that. And if we had the resources, we could actually start developing some of the contract terms ourselves. We plan to, with the contract terms incubator, maintain the critical focus. We don't shy away from challenges. Open source, bring it on. Data scraping, generative AI, bring it on. We also would want to educate the community. A couple other things that we would do is continue to coordinate with policymakers, because as we have our little incubator and we figure out what the solutions are for contracts, that's going to help inform policymakers on how to solve some of these issues. And then also coordinating with the technical community. Contract terms can reference technical tools, and we could bring them in and try to do this in a coordinated approach. So I think I'm through my 6 minutes. Thank you for your time, and would love to answer your questions.
Thanks so much, Lee, for... Try again? There we go. Lee, thank you so much for this presentation. It seems like critical work. I want to ask you a little bit about, as you think about developing model contract terms, there are obviously multiple kind of inputs. One of those is reducing transactional friction, right, and ensuring good bargains. The second, though, is more fundamental. Like, there are some principles and values that need to be reflected in how new contractual engagements will be developed. I'm curious, as you think about this project, what are the inputs and sources, and what's your process for determining normatively how a contract should be structured beyond the transaction friction issue?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And if you read our reports, we do talk about some of those societal issues. You know, right now we have basically contracts of adhesion where it's like, here, take these terms as is, where is. And, you know, the EU, through the Data Act, has really led the way of saying we want to have fair contract terms. So I think as we develop these contract terms, there's a couple principles. One, there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach because there are lots of different transactions. But we also want to set the bar so these contract terms reflect fairness. I mean, the current situation today with data scraping is really unsustainable. And people who are producing data, whether we're talking about our personal data, we're talking about the content we create, there should be mechanisms for fair allocation. And ultimately, it's bringing the community together. I don't think one individual has the answers to the question, but how do we come up with terms that are fair? And it could be a menu of terms.
if you don't mind my following up, I think that's a
Go
great
ahead.
answer. One of the conceits here is that the market, by defining how private actors transact with each other, will cover the domain of necessary topics and issues. But we know very well from the history of technology that there are many stakeholders in this private sector transactional environment that don't actually have proxy into the conversation of negotiation. So how do you think about making sure that the rights and responsibilities and vulnerabilities of external populations are reflected in how you think about the creation of model terms?
Yeah, and I think that's where the broad participation and the community that we've built is so critical. When we put our workshops together, we were very intentional. I called all of big tech and I said, you're coming to Washington, you're coming to Munich, you're gonna listen to this. And we brought in civil society. We have policymakers there. And that's where I think, GPAI, and we've had a really good relationship with the OECD, can be really powerful because there's an opportunity for multilateral organizations to say, if we're gonna help produce model contract terms, we're gonna take some of the normative values that are important to us and do it this way. And that's why I think GPAI could play such an important role here, and we hope to coordinate with members and get those viewpoints.
Thanks for the nice presentation. In the first presentation, we talked about regulatory concerns. Now, regulation is not answer to everything. Now, whatever initiatives we see here, they will obviously bring some mind shift in the people. So now, how do we measure that mind shift? That how it is taking place? Like, we are attending this session, all of us. We will go to our respective organizations, and how do we amplify those things?
Yeah.
How do we measure that aspect? That is very important.
Yeah, so I think a couple things. I mean, first of all, I want to seize on the point. I mean, regulation alone is not going to solve this issue. I mean, look at privacy right now. I mean, the US and the EU are still trying to figure out the privacy framework. Regulation takes a long time, and interestingly, model contract terms have been a key to that solution. And I've done programs with WIPO, with the OECD, and where we are, like, even separate and apart from privacy with intellectual property laws, the laws really differ across jurisdiction. In the United States, where I'm from, we have the fair use doctrine with copyright, but then you go to Europe and it's text and data mining. Like, we are not going to get to harmonization legally for a long time, which is why the contract terms, the business codes of conduct, the technical tools are so important. And part of our goal, to answer your second part of your question, is we do want to amplify this. And with funding, I think we can. We want to have more hybrid sessions, inclusive. With some of the funding, we have people from virtually every continent there, but we would actually pay for them to come join us in person so they don't have to be remote. We could build resources, build a website, so the information about what the various different initiatives is there. We would focus on education so companies would know that there are these contract terms. We would try to work on them becoming the norm so then they would have more bargaining power. But the outreach, the thought leadership, and that community building are all really critical to our 2024 plans, and we definitely need funding. I mean, we've done all this work on very modest funding, and the track record's there in terms of success. So if we had a little bit more funding, I'm confident with the group that we've built, we could really make a huge impact for everybody around the world.
Hi, I'm Bhavika from GIZ. So thank you for the presentation, very relevant. We are also actually grappling with some issues on licensing and open sourcing some data sets that we built over the last 3 years and problems that we had not imagined, 3 years ago. So this is very relevant, thank you. And which is why my question is a little more practical on, if you could give a more real world scenario of how you would actually implement this contract tool that you've proposed, and how would you ensure legal compliance to these?
Yeah, so I think, so just taking the open source, the first thing we want to do, and we want to have a virtual workshop on this early in 2024, is level set. that, you know, people talk about open source like it's one thing, but it's not. We have already an array of open source license agreements. And then we want to educate the community that with LLMs, it raises different issues that traditional open source software doesn't do, the transparency issues, the issues about the weight. Then like the next step is like, okay, well now that we all understand this, how are we going to build the contract terms? If we had the resources, GPAI could do it. Otherwise, we're trying to support other organizations to do it, and then just, you know, educating people. And we've been exploring similar approaches on the data scraping. And I think that, you know, on the enforcement issue, this is where GPAI, working with other multilateral organizations, can be really important, because we can then build some of this in that, you know, as a business code of conduct, you're going to do these contract terms. And if people if they sign on to the business code of conduct and they don't comply with it, well, from the U.S. perspective, the FTC might say that's an unfair and deceptive trade practice. So I think there are ways to build in mechanisms to give this more teeth. And then I think also encouraging policymakers to think about what are the remedies. With privacy today, there are certain companies that get fined hundreds of millions of euros every day of the week, and they keep doing it. But then we've seen, like in the U.S. with the FTC, where they've imposed injunctive relief, that if your algorithms are trained on data that they shouldn't have been trained on, you have to disgorge the algorithms. Well, that changes the dynamics. So I think, you know, through our work, we can think about, you know, what are the appropriate enforcement mechanisms? What are the tools that we have? How can we coordinate with policymakers to share our input and help them inform their work?
Hi, just one really quick last question. I'm Jordan from Co-Develop. As you're trying to build this standard, I'm wondering if you have a first use case that you're thinking about, because obviously we're trying to build a very broad shift, and sometimes starting with a use case can help.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's where, you know, frankly, we've been a little strapped on resources, but we've been talking with Whitebow and others about trying to find the use case. And I think some of the things that we've talked about is maybe starting easy, like with, nothing's easy, but maybe with the research community, because there's a lot of uncertainty right now on can researchers use data for certain purposes to advance their research? Can they use it for pre-production purposes? You know, all these license agreements say, well, you can use it for non-commercial purposes, and nobody knows what that really means. And if we could, you know, maybe start with a use case there, and possibly start with a use case where we don't have the privacy information, because then we still have to grapple with the IP laws, with the commercial issues. But you know, we can maybe wait a little bit on privacy. And we have had good engagement from some of the privacy regulators, including in Europe. And there are certainly pockets within that community that are very enthusiastic about this approach. So, you know, I think we would still try to work on the privacy issues, but maybe that initial use case would be more narrowly defined.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Before we move to the next project, just a reminder of the housekeeping rules that are in place here today. We unfortunately do have a packed schedule, and this session follows the MEC plenary, which is the annual convening of all the GPAI experts, and we would love for everyone to be there, and we wouldn't want to delay that session. So we'll stick to the sort of 6+6 format that we have, and while we're really happy that we have a very good audience here today, we would want to give the first opportunity to the panelists, and only time allowing, we would want to move to audience questions, please. I think with that, we move on to the third presentation for the day, Empowering Communities with Digital Ecosystems. Mike from Responsive AI Working Group.
No arani mai ana oku tupuna ko Sullivan toku whānau ko te aratu toku hapori e noho ana o ki ngā whenua me ngā wai tapu o te kara amaki. Tēnā ka mihi, tēnā koutou, ka mai ka hou. That's just a brief introduction to myself. I'm Mike O'Sullivan, Associate Professor at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. And I live in Te Aratu, and I just wanted to recognise the mana whenua there, and they're also, my community is one of the inspirations for this project. So this is work that's really started, although I've sort of been working on it for 10 years. And it's a partnership with some research organisations, also with Tata Memorial Hospital and some industry players in the digital twin space, next space, and Trimble. And what I'd like to do today is convince you to come on board and work with us and maybe throw a little bit of funding our way as well. This is a busy slide, but this is the only one I've got. So where it all starts with is with community. So we'll have communities, and I'm talking communities quite broadly, so it could be a suburb, which is where I live, it could be national government, local government, could be a hospital or a health district. And so we have a community of people, and they have to engage with a complex system. As a lot of us know throughout the COVID pandemic, where I was doing some modelling, trying to understand the effect of decisions in such a complex environment is often tough. And one of the ways to do that is to build models, or what I talk about as digital twins. However, a lot of the time the community sort of almost has a digital twin placed on them. So they don't really get involved in the data, they don't get involved in the AI that's running alongside the digital twin. And I want to change that. I want to have these communities walking alongside us the whole way. So you have your community here, up the top of citizens, citizen scientists, government, industry and academia. They get involved in that data acquisition. So we've been working with people locally in my community, students, citizen scientists, to help gather the data, put that data into these data stores. And the difference between just a whole load of data in a data store is this idea of context. So you can think of building information models, geospatial information, and other data models that bring context to that data and also dynamics to that data. So it might be you have that data spread across spaces, you have a data map, or you might have time series over time, or both. That can often lead you to have a bunch of different data stores from different places. So I'm thinking things like the environment, the urban setting, schools, etc. So what you need to do is then pull those all together using an ontology or a model, integrate that data and pull it into your digital twin. That then gives you a snapshot of what's going on in your community, and again, that community might be my suburb where I live, or maybe a hospital, and I'll talk to that about that pictured over here in a minute. However, if you want to make any changes or decisions about what you're doing with your complex system, your community, you've got to know what happens when things change. And so that's where AI comes in. And so things like simulation, optimization, analytics and machine learning all link with the digital twin model. And that then provides you with basically a playground. So in Māori the word is haututu, or tutu, which means play. And what I want to do with a digital twin is make sure that we provide our community with the chance to play with this complex system so they can understand the effect of the decisions they're going to make in that complex system. And particularly, we can't ask them to play with numbers and data and spreadsheets because a lot of the community isn't going to find that very accessible. So I think about things like serious games, virtual reality, augmented reality, to enable the community to really engage with what's happening in that digital twin. And that bring all that together then builds this idea of a digital ecosystem where you work with the community through gathering the data, through building the model to them, then playing with it and being able to make informed decisions. And I've got two examples here. So on the bottom left, this is a combination of land topography and weather data to look at flooding in the east coast of New Zealand, which has had very serious flooding early last year and ongoing issues. This is going to be pretty soon a virtual reality model where people can walk through and see how the flooding that affected them is modelled, and then hopefully do things like, could we raise that stop bank a bit better? Should we do a managed retreat out of that area, and see what the effect of those decisions would have in their community. Over here on the right is a hospital. So this is North Shore Hospital, which is in my catchment. And here we bring together data on schedules, patient conditions, treatment pathways, and we have a digital twin of the operation of the hospital. So here you can see all these moving patients around. We can then use that to help the people who are running the hospital, the people who are delivering the care, to understand if they make changes to the care pathways, if they make changes to the schedules, to the roster of the people, if they make changes to the way they even allocate people to procedures, what the difference is going to be. And a lot of this has been driven lately about equity, so making sure that it's equitable access to care in health systems. So the main inspiration for this is really by enabling communities to walk alongside us in these digital ecosystems, we're democratizing the technology that comes to them. So the communities can develop and own the digital ecosystems. They can benefit from putting their data into these ecosystems. They can benefit from the cutting edge data in ways that they can access easily. Then, if we, I always think we just cut and paste this procedure, this process other places, customize it for the new communities, but then those communities might share. So they don't need to share their data, but they can share the models and the outcomes of their models, and we then start building digital twins in both regional, national, and even global scale. So I'd really like, we've got lots of different partners in these communities already, but I'm really interested in more communities, and certainly if that comes with some funding, very excited to hear about it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for this presentation, and it warms my heart that you start from communities, a key starting point for all of the conversations we should be having here. But in this one, I actually want to ask you a different question. One of the benefits in this work comes from the operation of scale, that when we see how communities respond to moments of crisis or disaster, and we can look at, for example, telecom records that give us records of how many, many communities have responded, there's an efficiency and optimization that comes from that. So as you talk about building these kinds of localized digital twins and AI systems, how do you balance with that the insights that come from being able to look historically at responses and identifying patterns for better response when things happen?
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good question. My other pitch that didn't make it to this was about the pandemic resilience work we've been doing, which in that case we've been standardising our models to enable models to go across multiple communities. So I think the idea here is you build it really nicely for one community. You can then replicate that elsewhere with a little bit of customisation because no communities are the same. Bring those learnings together, and that way, so I can see, well, this community maybe is lacking in some resource and this community has extra. Why don't we share that a little bit? And so particularly if we have two digital twins or digital ecosystems for hospitals, we can then start coordinating those hospitals if they're nearby. So I saw some of that in the optimization in New Jersey, for instance. So I think it's possible. We don't necessarily have to share all the data or understand what you're saying as long as you get some good insights around that. But actually I think keeping communities safe means that they'll engage and they'll be in it. And then you can start saying, hey, we've got interesting water quality here in Te Aratu. What does it look like over in your atoll in Vanuatu? What are you doing over there? Your water's really clean. Is there something we can take from there to there? So I think you actually get a lot of those learnings, even by doing things locally. And so part of what inspired this is the idea of think globally, act locally. And so I want to model locally, but still make sure those learnings go globally.
Hi there, thanks again. So I'm curious what demand you're seeing from the community for this tool, and how this has actually worked, and if you have any examples of some changes that have happened or some collaboration with the government and the community that has actually led to some positive outcome.
Yeah, sure. So the one here on the left in the East Coast, they want us to do it yesterday. We're looking for some funding from the flood recovery national funding. A lot of the funding bodies like to do things nationally, and sometimes I feel like communities get forgotten, which is another reason for this. And one of the great untold stories of the COVID pandemic in New Zealand was that the Māori communities pulled together to get the best vaccination rate for Māori from any ethnicity, which is completely unheard of. So I think there's a lot of power in communities pulling together, and this is about helping those communities pull together. In terms of, so this one here actually is an existing digital ecosystem we ran with North Shore Hospital, and the finding we had there was just to make sure they had enough orderlies around. And so the orderly schedule didn't interact well with when the demand was for transits through the hospital. We enabled them to shuffle their schedule a little bit, and suddenly they were getting much better at making sure people weren't showing up late. So we are doing this. I guess for me, I've been doing sort of bits and pieces of this digital ecosystem as I'm working more in the digital twin space. I thought, well, it doesn't start and stop with the digital twin. There's the data coming in, and there's how you use it to help inform people. It's actually that decision-making process I'm really interested in. So we are doing it. We're doing it in little bits and pieces, and I'd like to sort of start doing it at scale, but bits and pieces at scale, if that makes sense. And I think you get the technology stack, and it might be different. So the technology stack for these two examples will probably be quite different, but we can sort of copy and paste the environmental technology stack to different environments, or the hospital technology stack to different hospitals. And once you have that commonality, then you can start sharing as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I had a similar follow-up question, which is, how ready is the community to be able to leverage a platform like this, right? Because have they got their data organized? Have they thought about what the use cases are? Do they have the technical capabilities to do something like this, to be able to use the insights that come in. So there is a on what kind of communities would be ready to use a platform like this.
Yeah, so the East Coast community in New Zealand is quite rural and with a large Māori proportion, and they're really innovative because they need it. So they have data. So I put this model together in about half a day using publicly available data sets on topography, have a bit of a guess on the rainfall, but we have, there's an organisation called NIWA that does all atmospheric stuff. So I think the data is there. In some cases, the community doesn't even know that the data is there. I know where most of it is. But also I think there's the idea of, so one of the things we want to do within my own community is look at the biodiversity, and we're going to get students to go out there with 360-degree cameras and start doing 5-minute bird counts with recording an area and using AI to tell what kind of bird it is. At least that's the longer term goal. So I think the communities are really keen to do it. Sometimes we have to get the data, sometimes we can find the data. There's so many different Internet of Things and monitoring sensors that they're really keen to use. And actually I think we want our young people to learn how to use that technology because they're going to need it. And I think this approach to decision making is coming, and I just want to get out ahead of it and make sure it's done in what I think is the right way. But there's an incredible keenness is what I was saying, which is part of the reason I'm even here. Is if no one wanted it, I wouldn't be wasting your time with it. But I've had communities ask me for this. Yeah, no problem.
So we'll really have to stick to time. I request you to probably use the networking opportunity so that we
I can talk to you in the break.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mike. I think with that, we move to the next presentation, Catalyzing Change, AI Impact on Latin American Workers. Mr. Bharat, please.
Hello, everyone. I would like to start by thanking the government of India and everyone that is present here supporting these initiatives. Today, I will present to you a project that we are working on and we are very excited to present. Catalyzing Change, the impact of Latin America workers with AI. Do you know that the most unequal region of the world is Latin America? Social inequality presents a number of different challenges for the region. This ends up in having lower quality access to education, limited access to education, and this creates a lack of opportunities. The lack of opportunities ends up of having people needing to be migrating, forced migration. On the other hand, there are other on the other hand, this creates additional, we have a number of, sorry, I'm just gonna go through my notes. On the other hand, Latin America has some remarkable advantages. We have a young and thriving population, as an average around 30 years old. We have almost every major city in our region adequate access to internet and mobile networks. And we are, just like India, early adopters of the technology. I'm Álvaro Norma, a researcher of the National Autonomous University of Mexico and GPAI Artificial Intelligence Solutions. Both institutions are compromised with the development of the region of Latin America and Mexico using cutting-edge technologies. Today, I'm proud to present to you our artificial intelligence solution that we are working on to address one of the main problems of English communication for people whose first language is not English. We are developing the first accent neutralizer solution for phone calls, enabling call center agents to be heard by the customer with a native English accent, regardless of their original accent. Through deep learning models, this solution is installed and runs locally in the computer of the call center agents, allowing him to have a clear and accent-free communication with a latency under a third of a second. So it is almost as if they're talking in real time without the limitation that sometimes accent could provide. For this solution, we are partnering with Allied Global. They are the main provider for customer service agents of major companies such as Booking.com. They provided us with data recorded for more than 4,000 hours of calls to train our deep learning models. Allied Global has a large operation in Guatemala. They had over 8,000 workers, mainly from Guatemala, Honduras, and Central America. To have clear, neutral accent and flawless communication in English, we are creating with them this solution. This is a massive benefit for both parts in the call, as communication can flow more efficiently. Our solution also has the potential to address social inequality problems in developing regions by allowing people with lower English level access a job that could not be possible before, democratizing access to new labor opportunities with higher incomes, reducing the barrier of education that was needed before. In a world where diversity is our strength, our tool promotes a shared language that celebrates differences without sacrificing communication clarity. It is a testament to the idea that effective communication knows no borders. We believe our accent neutralizer is a catalyst for global unity. I want to show you a short demo. It's only a few seconds. This was recently created by our team. Maybe you can recognize the accent of it. And this was created with artificial intelligence. Can we please add sound to the presentation? It's okay now? It has sound? Okay.
Could you briefly explain your return and exchange policy? Could you briefly explain your return and exchange policy?
This was generated with artificial intelligence. I'm going to play it again because it is too brief. Please pay attention. The first time, it's a natural agent with his natural accent, and the second one is generated with our solution.
Could you briefly explain your return and exchange policy? Could you briefly explain your return and exchange policy?
So, we want to be your partners in generating a more united world. This solution has the potential to change communication and to promote developing countries. Apart from our accent neutralizer solution, we are also partnering with different industries, such as banking, e-commerce, and entertainment solutions, also with the government of Mexico. We want to adapt our technologies to provide the best outcomes for our region and to create a more united world. If you are interested in watching the demo or having it, please scan the QR code, and there is also a code to our company. Thank you very much for your attention, and sorry about the beginning. I would like to take your questions, please.
Alvaro, I want to thank you for this, and I'm going to preface this by saying I'm going to ask you a hard question. I want to celebrate the fact that this solution lifts up the idea of making sure that there's economic opportunity for those who are outside of the global north English-speaking population and gives them a pathway to enter. I think that's amazing. I have to tell you, I had a very strong emotional reaction to this, though. For much of our work, I think as a community and certainly my own work, we think about how to center, celebrate, and lift up regional differences and allow people to have authentic conversations coming from who they are, where they are, and the ways that they engage. There's a very fundamental kind of idea about the fact that somebody from Latin America maybe speaks English with an accent because it's their second language. For an American who's trying to understand it, it's the only language they speak, right? So a tool like this that forces everybody into the structures of a global north expectation about what English should sound like. The question I want to ask you is about the second and third order effects of that. What does it mean for our values around representation, individual dignity? What does it mean to say the only way that you can engage in a productive economic way is to sound like somebody from the global north? It's a hard question. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have some reflections from your work to share on this, I'd really welcome hearing your perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you for the questions. Yes, so we knew that there will be some controversy around this solution for those reasons. What we believe is that this helps us celebrate the differences in a way that it could be used in every other language also, not only English, but for example, if you have someone from Texas and another person from Australia, both of them will talk in English, right? But with really marked accents and differences. So that will be hard even for them that are native English speakers to communicate. Imagine that with someone from Guatemala and another person from Ireland, that they also have a thick accent. Our solution is not about limiting our particularities, not about limiting our nationalities, but improving our communication so it could be crystal clear. It is of course controversial, but we believe that it will help us to have a more united world. Thank you.
So, it's a very interesting solution, and as NASSCOM, we have a lot of companies that work in the whole call center space also, so, we'd love to see how we can engage. But I think the question is more fundamental around, one of the best use cases of AI and generative AI is about customer operations and how that will get disrupted with more use of artificial intelligence. In fact, I think India has demonstrated with the Bhashini application how you can do local language to text to WhatsApp to back communicate in whatever local language. So how do you see that mix for an economy like Latin America, which has a lot of call center workers also? How are you seeing that shift?
Sorry, can you?
So my question is more saying, will you see artificial intelligence usage change how customer operations will happen, and maybe some of these voice operations will not be needed in the same format as they are currently?
Okay. Yeah, so it is a very good question. We believe that with these kind of solutions, developing countries will have a paramount of opportunity for development. Artificial intelligence has the potential to shift the reality of a region or of a country in a few years. And with adequate conditions, such as having a young population, adequate access to internet and networks, and being able to use the technology fast. We believe that it is going to be a reality in just a matter of time. Of course, regulations are going to be very, very important for this, but we like to believe that the pace that this technology is advancing is so fast that regulations are always going to be behind. So it has to be more of a collective effort to create these tools to include our own population into it and allow access to people that wouldn't have this access to new work opportunities. This will be very important also for the future of work in our regions. Thank you. Another question?
Thanks so much for the presentation. One of the challenges, even understanding other people like within the same language, is not just about accent, but also vocabulary. So I'm curious if your software has any ability to sort of translate within a language. For example, if an American is talking to a Brit, you might not know what a lift or a lorry is. So is there any applicability there? Thanks.
Okay. No, so it's not translating per se. It's more of just reducing when we are using these deep language models, we use a lot of data for several communications so that the model understands and improves over time to say exactly what the agent is saying, but without the accent. So it won't change the world. Like if someone in the UK says, there's a lorry, it won't be translated to a truck for someone in the United States. It just say it without the accent. Okay. Right? Thank you very much.
With that, we move to the next project, Global Impact of Scalable and Safe Responsible AI Solutions from the Responsible AI Working Group.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amir Bani Fatimi. I've been involved with GPAI for the past 3 years and been working on the Responsible AI group. The project I'd like to present to you today is a project that was designed in 2022 and we started in 2023 and implemented and operationalized it. And the goal today is for me to explain how this project needs more support in terms of scaling and hopefully we can get partnered together. The question about responsible AI is everywhere. We know that people talk about responsible AI in many ways. There's regulation, there's frameworks, there's guidelines, there's many people working on it. But the reality is that whether it's a startup or NGO or anyone working on a responsible solution, we don't really know what it means. We don't really know how these solutions can actually scale to meet their goals and impacts. So really, not to oversimplify a complex web surrounding responsible AI, I like to present this small diagram that could help probably picture what we're talking about. There are many solutions out there right now that are probably scalable in the sense that they can be implemented with AI and some data and then be useful for many. For instance, an image generator tool, or maybe a medical triage tool, or maybe a chatbot on an e-commerce website. These probably will scale to certain limits, but whether they are responsible or not is unknown. And sometimes they want to be responsible, but then have not designed it in a proper way to be responsible and scale accordingly. The issue with scaling is that if a solution is deemed responsible, it has not been meeting the requirement for scalability necessary. They might have access to all the data they want. They might be aligned with certain form of regulation. They may not have access to all the cultural context surrounding it. They may not have basically be working with people to really know the impact of the solutions to them. So there are pretty much 4 quadrants, solutions that are neither scalable or responsible in the largest sense of responsible AI. I'm not trying to define it right now. I think you all know. Solutions that definitely could scale, but they may not meet the requirement. Solutions that are definitely built to be responsible, all the basically transparency, explainability, and interpretability, every other aspect, but may not be built to scale. So how solutions can actually, to meet the impact of a global good and to be useful for society and public good, could actually do both. So that's the question we asked. And the project that we launched was about offering a number of teams globally the opportunity to work with GPAI experts. We had about 45 experts in the group, in the working groups. 26 of them signed up to be supporting this project. Many of them were active on it, about 80% of them were active on this project. And the goal was really to identify solutions, not projects, not on paper projects, actual solutions that are really live and working, and give them an assistance in evaluating not only their approach and responsibility, but also their operationalizing plans for scaling. And thanks to the expert group to see how this could work. We also wanted to make sure that government, that are members of GPAI and can oversee this project, can see how their teams are working and give a first look on what these teams are trying to do and how they can support such teams and similar teams in the forward. The call was done in April of 2023. We had about 23 teams that applied, and we selected, with the help experts, 5 of them. You can see which one. Actually, 2 of them were not country members of GPAI, but the rest were. And these 5 got to work with experts for about 5 months in a couple of deep dives. And the first deep dive was really to work on their design, their effort into putting the responsibility framework in place, how data is gathered, how they're evaluating, what benchmark they're using, how the solution can actually be validated. And the second deep dive was actually about how they will scale. Can they scale in volume? Can they scale across multiple genders, across age groups, across cultural differences, and how they can be supported by different entities or committees or sovereign governments. The 5 tips that we selected, I'm going to go very fast on it, and I apologize for those who have heard my presentation yesterday on the summary of this project. The 5 teams were respectively from these 5 countries: India, Italy, Mexico, Canada, and Germany. There was actually 6 teams in Rwanda that had to drop out for other reasons of not being able to support themselves inside the project. But the teams in India and Mexico are non-profit effort. The teams in Canada and Germany, their solutions were for-profit projects. And the one in Italy is a research project, but also could have some commercial applicability. The one in India was really about healthcare access and creating benchmark of data sets of images for evaluating a proxy for predicting certain diseases in India. So it's about gathering data and govern that data. On Italy is about man and machine collaboration. It was that how workers can work with robots in an environment where they have to trust and feel comfortable working on a robot, what are the behaviors surrounding them. So it was more of an embodiment of an AI system. The one in Mexico really was working on a challenge about allocating resources to different land use and how this land use can be used more for different type of activities, whether agriculture or energy transition or any type of other land use, and then have a classification module on that. Canada and Germany both were working on more conversational systems. One was about really having a framework to adapt every chatbot, every form of conversational solutions inside any website. And the one from Germany was really working on providing a way to people to voice themselves. The project right now is working, and we have had many requests for adding our resources to expand it. The 5 teams that we selected was on design a small sample because we don't want to get it too big. But we have had a conversation with different countries and groups that wanted to support this and expand that. For us, the next step would be really to put our knowledge and learning into an operational guideline for implementing responsible AI that could scale, expand the reach to other countries, and support the teams. Geographic distribution is very important. We learn more by understanding what they do, but also sharing that learning back and making sure that they foster more communities. We need also to build capacity. Right now, we're trying to train the trainer and train the mentors. So there's local mentors in different regions that could support their own teams, because it's not just enough about technology capability, but there's also many other approaches. And also work with the GPAI government. These are the members of GPAI, and to show them how actually we bring back to the members the benefit of all these experts that are gathered with a very large knowledge pool to really help that. The goal really for us also is to get help and support on more implementation, getting more partners and local partners to help us implement. There are many incubators, many organizations that are doing good work, but how can you actually operationalize responsible AI? That's the hard question. We're not going to fight after regulations or different topics that are important. We adopt the GPAI frameworks, the OECD and UNESCO guidelines and frameworks. We just want to make sure that solutions that go out are meeting the requirements of responsibility and are set for scaling. And that setting for scaling not only provide more actionable responsible AI solutions, but also could be for each one of them a case for support and funding, assuming that they do provide the benefit, the impact they are proposing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amir. This was a fantastic presentation. I got the benefit to seeing this yesterday as well. So I have an unfair advantage. My question for you, and you and I began to talk about it last night, but how do we get more LMIC countries involved? How do we repeat similar calls I am particularly interested in Africa. How do we do that in those countries? How do we make sure that we have mentors? How do we make sure that we scale responsible innovations there?
The call for participation that we created was global in nature, and we had teams and projects from different countries. I think it requires a more specific outreach to incentivize local committees and groups that are supporting their own committees to really participate and get the benefit of GPAI expert, but also at the same time trying to find programs to train the trainer, provide local support, provide local expertise, and basically bring this knowledge that we have gathered about these operational guidelines to be tested locally and improved locally, so become their own. So this agency model has to be done by really providing a way for us working side by side and not just sending back the knowledge, but also working together. But we need to do that. We need support from local organizations. There's so much that GPAI can do as an organization to reach out. GPAI is not a funding organization necessarily, and GPAI is not a regulator or a research organization, but we can actually, with the collective knowledge that we have, really help activate all these good ideas that are out there and give them a sense on how they can be operationalized. Those ideas are good anywhere in any country. There's no shortage of ideas. It's just that they may not be visible or may not have access to the right resources to really be tested on how actually they can build a solution that could test two things: being responsible and being trustworthy and being able to meet the requirements of whatever regulations or framework there is, but also have a demonstrated benefit so they can keep sustainable support over the line, whether they're non-profit or for-profit. Thank you for your question.
Hi, thank you. I'm Bhavika from GIZ. So you mentioned you want to extend the geographic coverage of activities, right? And then doing that means that you're dealing with many more regulatory environments and different contexts. So how do you plan to bring all that together in creating like one operation, like operationalizing the guidelines?
Thank you for the question. What we observed is that out of those 5 teams, which is a small sample, challenges are the same. Challenges are testing, data gathering, making sure there is a provenance, making sure there is a framework and oversight, making sure that the users have been involved in the loop of testing, making sure that people are educated about using it, make sure that support systems exist around those. So those are common challenges that they face. Of course, there's always a challenge of funding and access to certain resources. The difference is that the goal is to work with every institution or organization locally because they bring the knowledge which is local. We have had some early conversations to do this in Africa next year. We had some preliminary discussions about having some support maybe in India. But we're going to be relying on that partner knowledge to really activate what is necessary to help them out. And we're not going to substitute ourselves. We're trying to really coordinate and show that maybe others can do it themselves. The goal is to not open sources on the right term, but really share the knowledge widely, and the best practices become very obviously available to everyone. And we operate under the overall guidelines that are worked by many regulations, many organizations that are working on those principles. We just try to make them applicable and test them and make sure that the experts that we have around us are really involved with real practical cases and try to learn together. We learned a lot during that process as well.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering if you've thought about sort of working upstream of where you are right now, right? So you're working with sort of somewhat established organizations and trying to push them up into this upper right-hand quadrant. But I'm wondering, like, if you could work with accelerators or incubators or perhaps even directly with investors who might be investing in these kinds of firms, and thinking about, especially with investors, right, like they have kind of a unique opportunity to push a company in a particular direction with their funding. And it seems like that might be a little bit more upstream of where you are and therefore potentially a little bit more of an impact later on.
I think this is a wonderful suggestion. We approached a few incubators, not to name them, that are global in nature, and a few local ones. The answer was that some of our teams are commercial and they want to basically get funded. Some of them are from NGO, they wanted to do the good work. They didn't care about really implementations at that point. The difficulty upstream is that we need to find a flow of teams and projects that do care about applications that are for public good or basic applications that are responsible in nature, that could scale when regulations are harder and contexts are stricter about their safety and trustworthiness, have done the design properly so they can actually scale. So the amount of maturity in those teams is unknown right now. So we have to do some additional work for upstream to evaluate opportunities for deal flows of teams that will come and do this process. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We move on to the next presentation, repositories of public algorithms, a march for government accountability. Go on, please.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Juan David Gutierrez. I'm an academic from Colombia. I'm based in Bogota, and I'm a member of GPAI's Responsible AI Working Group. This project is approved in the 2024 working plan, so it's going on, but and that's why it's in the early stage. But we need more. We need help, and this is why I'm here. So I'm wondering, how many of you visited the AI Expo yesterday? Raise your hands. Okay, some of you, I absolutely invite you to visit the AI Expo. If you visit, you'll be aware that there's so many companies that are working for introducing all sorts of applications of AI for government in India and elsewhere. And if you heard yesterday's Prime Minister's intervention, you know that AI is central in India's future and in government efforts. And of course, India is not an exception. Most countries around the world are looking for ways to implement AI solutions for government. And this is great, this is good, but there's a big but. And it's that the rate of adoption of these systems by governments is faster than the disclosure of information about the use of these systems. And of course, if these systems, some of them are automated decision-making systems, have incidents in our lives, in citizens' rights, we have the right to know. We have the right to know, to understand why certain decisions are taken through these algorithms or with the support of algorithms, and in some cases even to react to those decisions and maybe request a reconsideration of certain decisions. But we cannot do that if we are not aware that AI systems or other more simpler algorithmic systems are being used. And this is where our solution enters, and it's the repositories of public algorithms. So if you're aware of algorithmic transparency, there are two main models for complying with this principle. a passive way of dealing with transparency. It's the government just answering every time there's a request for disclosure of information, so in a case-by-case basis. Or there's a proactive model by which government actively inform citizens what algorithms are being used, how are they used, and whether there's any way in which citizens can request redress. And I have already built a repository of public algorithms in Colombia. I led a team of researchers who created a data set of 113 systems used all over the public sector based on publicly available data. It was done with the help of the government. It was a public-private partnership. And we think that this is a stepping stone for accountability. It's of course, algorithmic transparency it's not, of course, a silver bullet or the only thing that we need in AI governments, but it's the basic of AI governance for citizens. We built our repository in over a year. We had to consult over 300 sources to build it, because governments do disclose sometimes what algorithms they're using, but in the most remote part of their websites, not in a centralized, clear platform that everyone can access. And actually, our project in Colombia was inspired by another project in the Global South. It was inspired by a Chilean project from the Universidad Adolfo Ibáñez that also created their own repository, and not only created a data set, but they also opened up a digital platform that anyone can access in a very friendly manner. And why I'm mentioning the Colombian case and the Chilean case? Because they're the best examples of repositories that you can find in the Global South. And actually, if you allow me, putting aside the European Union that has probably the biggest AI repository in governments, the cases of Colombia and Chile are the most complete public algorithm repositories that there are. And this shows that the Global South, it's actually pioneering, that there's actually contribution from the Global South for global AI governance. And we need this in Africa, we need this in Asia, and we need this everywhere, quite frankly. We need these repositories. And we believe that there's an opportunity for building these repositories worldwide. And this is why in our multi-year plan, we have a first delivery that would be a report on the state of repositories worldwide. Up to now, I have only mapped 20 repositories, most of them in Europe, South America, and the US. That's it, only 20 in the world, and that includes supranational, national, and subnational government repositories. Next year, we're going to create 2 new data sets of repositories in different countries with their online platform. And in the following year, we don't want to just keep on building data sets on our own. We want to create guidelines and recommendations for countries, universities, and private sectors, actors that want to work together and create their own repositories. And we also want to create a first draft of a standard for proactive algorithmic transparency, which doesn't exist really. The UK does have one a standard for recording of algorithms, but it's not thought for this kind of proactive algorithm repositories. So, of course, it would be wonderful if you could shower us with resources, but rather than just that, I'm asking your help to help us connect with other organizations in Africa and Asia, because we could keep on doing these repositories in America or in Europe, but we have to go elsewhere as well. So thank you very much for your attention.
So I have a question on accountability and transparency, and it probably also applies to the previous speaker's scalability thing. There is a inherent contradiction in algorithms. Ones that are explainable don't perform well. Their performance is lower. And the one that scale well or they perform well, you don't have the transparency because you don't quite know how the algorithm works, how the convolution network work and how the things are. So even though you have this, accountability is hard because forget the government, even the scientists don't know how the algorithm works. So it becomes it's a difficult problem. That's my comment is. And I want to see your reaction in terms of both, how will you, it's good, the data is a big problem. The data itself has a lot of issues, but the algorithm itself is not explainable in general.
Thank you very much. Have you ever tried to look for something in a room with no light? You won't find it, right? Probably not. With light, maybe you won't find it either if you don't look well, but there are higher chances. So it's the same with transparency. The repositories won't or are not intended for, let's say, in disclosing the code source of the algorithm. It's much simpler information. When is an algorithm is used? How does it work? Is there a redress system? So it's more practical information for citizens who want to understand how decisions are being made and where they have the possibility of contesting the decision. And of course, algorithmic transparency has various degrees, and of course, everyone here in this room is probably aware that machine learning systems tend to be opaque, and it would be very difficult to make them explainable. It's often difficult, but this is not the objective of the repository. In the end, the objective of the repository is placing the responsibility of the organization and the individual who is using the system to take decisions. Because systems are not the ones who are responsible. It's humans, it's organizations. And the only way to place the responsibility and make accountable people for the effects of the system is by other people knowing that it's actually being used. And I think that in the future, if you ask me for year 3, 4 of this project, I would tend to think that the future would be on working with organizations, civil society organizations, and also private organizations who will be able to do something else with the information. Because of course the information on its own is not sufficient. We need to do something with it. And sometimes the information is available, but communities don't have the capacity. So it's actually the capacity to process that information and do something about it. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. So I know you said the kind of key objective here is transparency, and I could imagine there being cases where activists or journalists are using this kind of repository to hold accountable decision makers. But I'm also wondering about a secondary use case, which would be, as you're gathering all this data, you then have an opportunity here to say, okay, what questions can we ask about this data? We have all these different use cases of different kinds of algorithms across different governments, different sectors. And I'm wondering if you've thought about, like, based on the data that you intend to collect with this, what kinds of research questions, what kinds of things you could unearth based on that data?
That's a great question, and it's in the center of my research agenda. So after we built the data set in Colombia, we learned that 18% of the systems implemented by the public sector aimed at justice problem, at law enforcement. And this was interesting, like no one was aware of that. And then there was education and environment. And we've seen that this is the how the Colombian government has prioritized the implementation, but it's not the same elsewhere. So for example, in Chile, the story is different. Most of the algorithms are used for health purposes, for enforcement purposes, and for education purposes. So in the end, as perhaps you are aware, how governments use their resources tell us more about their priorities than their discourses and their narratives. So I think that understanding how governments are adopting these systems and what types of organizations are being more successful at doing this. So just to give you another example, for some reason that one should probably research, the Competition Law Authority in Colombia has 7 different algorithms operating for different activities, both related to enforcement and non-enforcement activities. And this is actually quite surprising for a relatively small authority. So how come a relatively small authority was able to develop its own system, because it's not just purchased, but it's developed in-house, and actually being able to use them? So understanding the systems in their context and how they were developed, I think that's also very useful, and that's something that we can delve deeper with this type of repositories. Thank you.
With that, we move to the next presentation, the Hitchhiker's Guide to Responsible AI. We have Mr. Boris from the Future of Work.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's my great pleasure and honor to be able to talk to you about CAST project. The CAST is the official name of the project within the GPAI framework, but I like to think about our project as this, the Hitchhiker's Guide to AI. For those of you who are not familiar with the work of Douglas Adams, who is the original author of the book series about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it was an artifact that was a mix between Galactic Travel Advisor and ChatGPT or Siri that provides answers in perilous moments to the people and entities who traveled galaxy in Douglas Adams' universe. So this is something that we aim for. So we would like to build an interactive online framework that supports teams that work on AI-based solutions, services, and products in the times when they are planning their AI journey, when they have their own perilous moments during the development, and they need to apply responsible AI guidelines in their works. So there is, there is a little doubt that the AI universe is currently in this time of inflationary expansion. After ChatGPT, I think even probably this Big Bang moment for AI world was when AlphaGo has beaten human master in this game, which was supposed to be impossible for another 100 years, but it happened. And today we are facing a situation when there are tremendous incentives for people who are jumping the AI bandwagon. So everybody is trying to do that. We are expecting just in a couple of years the valuation of this market to reach almost $16 trillion. And everybody will be doing AI. Every system, every product built will have some kind of cognitive capacities of capabilities to learn and adapt to the environment based on AI techniques and algorithms. And obviously there is a lot of perilous moments that we can see when we are looking at media headlines. And all this situation creates, a world where there is a lot of hype, a massive hype, and also a massive fat factor, this fear, uncertainty, that doesn't help us to actually build the things right, the right things, and build them right. And attempting to do something like that, to give a practical, actionable advice to teams who actually work on the solutions, is not an easy thing. And there are at least 2 problems that we need to solve on that way. And the first problem is, well, as it was observed by the authors of this very inspirational report produced by a group of scientists for the government of Netherlands recently, well, they say, because of the practices of startups and companies, also innovation teams in enterprises, so practices like perpetual beta, MVPs, fail fast instead of fail safe, and so on, the world around us is becoming kind of a living AI lab. And as much as we can like this idea of living labs, once we are talking about systems that run beside of us on the public roads, that manage the air traffic, or that are making, supporting the decision affecting our health, this is not really an encouraging situation. Well, it may sound weird in a country that is famous for its CMM 5-level certification of its IT companies, but the world of AI at large has this capability, has this feature that we are really lagging quick practices behind the tempo, the speed of growth of this market, of this AI universe. And this was also observed by Gary Marcus and Ernest Davis, American AI researchers who are often referenced by the report I just have mentioned. And they go as far as saying that the world of AI, it's not that it's lacking engineering practice, it's lacking very often solid craftsmanship in their product development. So that's the problem number one. We need to actually collect, to find, to reveal the best practices that are used by the teams who are the centers of excellence for responsible AI development, but not on the level of governance, but on the level of actual development processes, product initiation, product conceptualization. And the issue number one is this, I'm sorry for this stereotyping, but it's something I call geeks versus suits problem. It's been living in IT world for decades, but it's becoming more acute as the stakes are going higher with AI. So we have these two groups that are fundamental to delivering AI solutions and products, which have different conceptual models, which have different sets of motivation, and that should actually cooperate or collaborate together, have a common language to deliver AI solutions, products, and services in a responsible way. And so what we are trying to do is actually to deliver them this online interactive framework that starts with a common language, actually, and map of AI-based solution, showing not what technologies we use, because technologies is secondary to the concept. So it asks the question how far and in which directions AI can take us when we are trying to change the world, transform the world with AI technology. And these solution maps, the categories of solutions we can deliver, is actually linked to best practices on the level of design patterns, design heuristics, but also responsible AI guidelines, so that everybody who is consulting his idea or trying to invent something new can use this map to actually navigate as far as actual responsible AI principles he or she should apply. And it's also based on real-world examples and designed in a way that supports community-based development of this framework. We think that nobody is as smart as everybody, and really the current status of the project is that we have this demonstrator that you will see in a moment, and we want to use it, we are currently using it actually to onboard industrial partners, research partners, and all that might use this framework to help them apply responsible AI principles in their actual development, product design and development processes. So, well, this is here you can see our guide in action. I allowed myself to display this "Don't Panic" button because I think it was also a fundamental characteristic of the actual guide. It has a cover which displayed this bold statement, "Don't panic." I think this is a mantra that we very much need in the universe of AI. So ending here, I'm open for questions from the panel.
Hi, thank you. I'm Bhavika from GIZ. So we've all seen our fair share of guidelines, if I may say. There's just the space is so crowded now, right? So I just want to understand from you, what do you think what is the lacuna that you are sort of trying to fill here, and what is it that you're doing different, and whether this framework is adaptable across sectors, across large and small models?
Yes, the short answer, yes, it is adaptable. But I think with the problem with the frameworks that we are actually facing is that, well, they may be more than 40 of them, but they are either very general and high level and focus really on principles and values. And this is not a world that is often visited by the people who actually do the product development work. They are more focused on, again, rather narrow frameworks that are built around technologies, or sometimes some best practices, like, for example, managing the AI projects, like this cognitive projects, for example, project management framework. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to approach it holistically, but on the level that is familiar for both people responsible for technology governance and management, and people who are actually product architects, product owners, these people who are fundamental for development work to happen. And so, and we are rather consolidating existing practices and practices from teams and from other frameworks, so that we can use this as a navigator, really, as a guide, not another methodology.
Thank you. And great title.
Thank you.
I totally resonate the title and I think the depth of work that you're doing. I just had a follow-up question to Bhavika's, right? That how do you drive adoption? Because I think that's one of the biggest struggle that we are seeing. You create these guidelines, you'll create the frameworks, but getting people to adopt this unless it's driven through a technology organization whose products I'm using tends to be stifling. So any thoughts around that?
Well, absolutely, this is number one issue with our idea. And how we want to do it is, first we want to build this network of industrial partners. We are already starting to do that. The content of the guide is actually being developed with companies who do the robotic solutions, who do insight-oriented solutions that are doing this deep analytically oriented products. So we start with them, and we want to expand this network of organizations. We are also talking to the high players, yes, so organizations like Microsoft or Google, hoping that they will at least endorse the framework. So they said, okay, we have our own ideas, but this is also a good navigation that leads also to some parts of our conceptual framework, how to do AI responsibly. So that's our idea. And the GPAI is obviously a very good place for amplifying this idea and to getting to also to the big players. Okay, thank you very much for your questions then. And
I think with that we move to, the final presentation for the day, Safety and Assurance of Generative AI. Mr. Nicholas, please.
Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? All good? Thanks, Robert. So this is a pitch competition, and I'm the last one. It's been heavy, and congratulations to all the presenters. So my name is Nico. My day job is that I lead an AI policy think tank called the Future Society, which I think can be credited with having done pioneering work in the domain of AI governance. As part of that, we theorized in 2018 an IPCC for AI that more or less was a bit what GPAI was about. So here I'm stepping into this presentation on behalf of the two project co-leads, Inma Martinez, whom I saw there, or Meg Chair, and Cyrus Hodds, and Sara Karegani, who was the former head of the UK AI office. This project, in my opinion, and I'll try and follow problem-solution framework so that we can engage. What's the problem? Under the Hiroshima AI process led by Japan in the G7 presidency that was trying to grapple with and start a process to respond to the generative AI revolution. I don't need to explain how revolutionary that revolution is, and the Japanese government decided to step in and leverage their presidency on that. And for that, we now have a code of conduct which has been deployed, which has been agreed upon. There's immense challenge to deploy and make that code of conduct a reality. We're talking about developing mechanisms and instruments such as content verification, watermarking, testing, evaluation, verification mechanisms, know your customer, accident prevention regimes, and many others, in a way that works from an innovation and commercialization perspective, in a way that leverages the best practices on data governance, in a way that, in fact, at the end of the day, advances responsible AI practices, and in the way that prepares for the future of work. If we are all going to prepare our kids, our colleagues to become prompt engineers in so many ways, how do we do that? How does that work in the context of a value proposition? The response from the MEG, meaning cutting across the 4 working groups, is this: SAFE, the Safety and Assurance of Generative AI project. It's not a project in isolation. It's a project that I think has been adopted under the Work Plan 2023, and therefore will be starting. And my in a way, pitch to you is not only money, but it's also debunking some of the things which are up there and making it work in a collaborative way, because it's a cross-MEG project. And so it will bring several experts, and so we're talking about a safe workforce, trying to mobilize our colleagues, and many of the projects that we've heard today about are potentially going to be liaising with us, and we look forward to that. So in practice, what will we do? We are going to be doing and follow an operational framework that is going to try and identify first and map in a dynamic way all these AI safety mechanisms and their related challenges in terms of execution, in terms of commercialization. Is red teaming a mature market? No, it's not. How do we create, how do we help them, and how do we make it viable for revenue models to exist there? And why it is so important too, as an example, is because either we do that, or most likely these codes of conduct are going to remain not a figment of our imagination, but an unfulfilled dream. And we know that for behaviors of the developers, deployers, and investors via systems to evolve, we need these cocktails of soft, and indeed, yes, hard regulatory mechanisms, but at the core, the soft mechanisms, such as these codes of conduct, are what provides the connective tissue for behaviors to exist. And so if we want to develop a know your customer verification regime that does not cancel the possibility of open sourcing these models, then we need to do that well. And we believe that GPAI can have a role there. So it's going to follow a basic process of listing, dynamically mapping these mechanisms, and the companies and the nonprofits behind it, and then trying to assess their maturity, build a better understanding of their deployment challenges, list them, connect them, and help them towards deployment. Because we believe that, I don't know whether it's going to be a directory, eventually a repository, we don't know yet. But creating the conditions so that all the members the member states of GPAI can benefit from these innovations in a way that is accelerating the deployment is going to be key. So in other words, this project is a lot about trying to tackle the immense velocity challenge that we have to deal with generative AI. We are so far behind in terms of execution, and technology is moving so fast that if we want AI safety and responsible AI to be a reality, if we want these new testing, verification, and validation mechanisms that today for generative AI do not exist, if we want to create these shortcuts to interpretability, shortcuts to alignment in a way that today do not exist in the way in which big or smaller generative AI players develop their models, we need to accelerate towards that. And we want to be able to, because GPAI was developed at a time when the generative revolution had not yet started. So this velocity and the magnitude problem were not yet there. We were comfy, in a way, planning for the AI revolution to come and kick. Now it has kicked. We have to react quickly. And if you look, and so in a way, this project is an attempt to shortcut the problem and make sure that from 2024, at the MEG level, we at GPAI have a response to that in a way that makes sense to the member states, because at the end of the day, we, the experts, serve the member states. You are commissioning us as volunteers to serve you in so many ways. Well, that is our service to you. We are not going to do that alone. What we're listing up there is a sample of potential partners that we know very well. In RIA and MILA, I don't think will be too complicated, but the Stanford Center on Research and Foundation Models, and many others, UNESCO, OECD, of course, SEMIA, and others. Some of you are in the room. I'll stop there, and we'll move to Q&As, because I know we're short in time. We're running a bit late. Thank you so very much, and look forward to working together.
Hi, Jordan from Co-Develop here. Thanks for the presentation. I'm wondering if you have any initial countries that you're working with on red teaming or systems, or how you're thinking about starting off.
Well, one thing that we're discussing is how that work can feed into the AI Safety Summit. There was Bletchley Park. There will be one in Korea. There will be one in France. How can we bring this accelerated building of knowledge and best practices there? So to respond to your question, yes, we have started to engage typically with the United Kingdom, with France, not yet with Korea, and obviously with Japan. Japan, in a way, we owe to Japan a special level of engagement on that project, and they can count on us for that, for sure. And beyond, of course, there is the US AI Safety Institute. I'm quite hopeful that France and Europe will start their own, so that's the kind of actors we want to work on. Because at the core of what they do under safety is model evaluation, one emerging practice of which is not well codified, not well understood, including in the revenue model, is red teaming. When you are a red teamer, is it okay to take a contract from OpenAI or Anthropic AI to red team their model? Well, yes and no. We need an internal auditing function, but we also need an independent auditing function, and we also need a regulatory backstop. So when you look at this emerging value chain, it needs to be shaped. But starting from where these AI safety institutes are emerging, so UK, US, and tomorrow hopefully France and Japan, and hopefully India, of course, is something that we are particularly focused on. Particularly on red teaming, but there are many other things beyond red teaming, hence the dynamic mapping. We don't want to fall into the rabbit hole or tunneling. There's so many risks. When you move fast, or when you want to move fast, there are so many things, so many bad decisions you can make. And that's why we want to operate it at the MEG level. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Robert. Thank you, Nico, for your presentation, the project, and even challenging us, everyone. I have a question to the title. You focus in that project on more on the safety and assurance dimension. Do you think it's enough to generative AI? In some countries, even in the GPAI mandate, we have a written trustworthy artificial intelligence framework. Safety and assurance, maybe it's not everything, yeah? What do you think about developing of that stream? Thank you.
No, I fully agree, absolutely. Maybe one caveat as to why we're front-loading safety here. If we want a country like India to be able to deploy algorithmic lending based on these kind of models, which are huge and totally uninterpretable, non-robust, big models. That's what the question, someone asked this beautiful question before. Regulation is not a barrier to innovation when done well. It's an enablement of long-term innovation. Here's the same thing. If we don't tackle safety first, if we don't, by design, the citizens have trust into their engineers, we should not break that trust. For the first time here, we're putting on the table of our social nation-building projects a technology which is powerful, pervasive, proliferative, but not robust. And so if we don't put safety by design, and if we don't, one of my work is to push for regulation that we incentivize safety by design. When the pre-trained, unsupervised learning phase of a large language model is done, there is not much you can do. You can fine-tune, of course, but the core is already developed. So the safety by design is so important. Typically, if we want to create the conditions for algorithmic lending to happen here in a way that does not violate the promise of democracy and equality that lies at the center of what brings us together under GPAI.
with that, we move to the actual final presentation for the day, from wrench to robotics, preparing factory workers for the AI era.
Thank you so much. My apologies for being on the way to the MEC plenary that's likely to happen soon after this. And last but not the least, I wanted to bring to the attention the project that we have proposed, which is preparing the factory workers for the AI era. The background to this is, we all are aware that about 1 billion workers in the global south are likely to be impacted by AI. Particularly when the AI models move into the self-awareness AI and general intelligence AI. It's desirable that the 3D jobs are taken over by AI and robotics, the dirty, dangerous, and difficult jobs. But it's not a very welcome move that a large number of informal workers would be replaced by robotics, particularly in developing economies where lowly skilled surplus labor is the norm. That's the situation. And we have to pay attention to the lives, livelihoods, and the future of their own families. That's extremely important. Now, advances in AI are inevitable, and we can't slow down. We have to, it can't be halted. We have to go with the wave because this is something that's happening all around the world, but we do not want jobless growth in many economies, particularly in the developing south. We don't want jobless economies. Let's take the example of India. We have 450 individuals in the workforce, of which only 13%, roughly about 65 million, are in the organized sector. We are talking about a huge number of people in the unorganized sector. When it comes to the unorganized sector, 3/4 are men. When it comes to organized sector, 3/4 of the organized sector workers are men, and only 1/4 is women. But when it comes to the unorganized sector, women take the leadership, and there are many, many of them in the workforce. And many of them have to work 57 plus hours to gain subsistence living. So that's the reality. We do not want AI to be a foe, but a friend to all these people. How can we do this? None of the skill strategies, unfortunately, focus enough on the informal sector today, whether it is the national strategy on AI or even some of the very formidable strategies that have come out. So what I want to do is to pay some attention together with all of us in terms of preparing them for the best rather than for the worst. Now what we are offering is AI literacy for factory workers with scalable pedagogy, with engaging and relevant content that the informal workers can consume, appropriate delivery models. At this point in time, the online face-to-face blended models are not very conducive to people who are at the fringes. Based on ethos and partnership, actually using participatory approaches to solving problems, i.e. employer organizations, employees, as well as other stakeholders in creating the curriculum and delivery solutions. But pilot testing in a large sample set so that we can come up with scalable outputs and replicable and adaptable outcomes. So that's the solution that we are proposing. Now the idea is to scale the pilot among 3,000 individuals together with a particular sector council in India, where we have secured some initial seed funding and also some content partnership in terms of producing the appropriate content. But in order to scale up, we are looking at partnerships. We are looking at advisory support and also funding, so that a multi-stakeholder based approach could be imbibed for scaling up. What we are asking is $1 million for reaching out to 300,000 people. With our funding, we are likely to move to 3,000 individuals and pilot test. But our second pilot, scalable pilot, is to be among 1% of the workforce in India we are talking about. So 3 million people. And once it is a kind of a solution, we would be in a position to scale it up further in a large scale in using alternative delivery models, using AI for AI-based solution for creating the solutions to the challenges. Who am I? I've been mentored by Professor M.S. Swaminathan, who we lost 75 days ago, who actually mentioned that productivity in perpetuity without causing ecological harm. So that's his vision. That was his vision for the Evergreen Revolution, somebody who produced the Green Revolution. And in those ethos, I've launched numerous projects, whether it's Telecenter Women Project with the ITU, Telecenter Academy with 14 different open universities, with British Telecom, Mahindra, BT, Cisco, and others. The first ever call center in this country for the farmers, which was replicated among teachers and others. And during the pandemic, working with LabourNet in India, we produced an alternative livelihood opportunity for those workers who lost their jobs in the automobile sector, also in the beautician sector, in preparing them to become sanitation and hygiene entrepreneurs. My organization has produced a lot of appropriate technological solutions, be it using community radio or MobiMOOC, which works on feature phones, to audio MOOC, to Aptus as devices. So we are into providing scalable, appropriate solutions for scaling. Thank you. If there are no questions, maybe.
Well, thank you very much. This is Yushi from JICA. It's a great concept that this is definitely needed. Thanks to really secure the better job for those getting really affected by the evolvement of AI. And do you have, thinking about the first use case for the 3,000, do you have any, can I have a little more color on what it might be the first use case? Would it be the partner? Can you just a little bit explain on that?
Yeah, so the first set of partners would be with a manufacturing sector council in the manufacturing sector, working with some of our known partners like FICCI and others who have close relationship with Gurgaon-based organization looking at the factory workers there. And the experience that we go by are from the past experience of us. And this evening we are launching Day of AI India, focusing on teachers. There are 10 million teachers in this country, and we are launching a curriculum for teachers who teach at the age level of 6 to 9, grades 3 to 5, so 8 to 11. So this is the kind of background that we have, but we are looking at a small set of sample in the outskirts of Delhi, place called Gurgaon, working with factory workers and the employers in developing this curriculum in a participatory manner.
Thank you for your presentation. It's a really important framework, what we can see. Very needed. I have only one comment and try to convert this for the question. Having on the table scalable pedagogy, this is a great approach. But first we need to understand, and AI is very contextual. And how maybe you found next step, next phase, how you can approach to the replicability, having the diversity as a rule, as a value? Do you honor the diversity first before replicability, or maybe replicability is some default dimension? Probably not, because you added the adaptability, yes, but still having artificial intelligence on the table, probably that diversity in that framework could be very important to understand very dynamic landscape and environment. What do you have some consideration from that perspective?
Yes, indeed. I know at this point in time we are working with farmers in a state called Tamil Nadu with the Grameen Bank in terms of promoting entrepreneurial and financial literacy among the farmers. So we use a tool called MobiMOOC to reach them out in a manner that they can consume a very structured learning program which they could action upon. So it's not the normal solution. Now we also have several tools that are at our disposal which are produced by very many national initiatives, like Bhashini was mentioned, Anuvadini and others, which could translate and also produce audio content, translate and produce audio content in different languages. So looking at the diversified set of people that we are talking about, that 450 million people at the bottom of the pyramid, there are all sorts of individuals ranging from agricultural laborers to non-agricultural laborers, those who are in the manufacturing sector, the construction sector and others. So what we are attempting at is providing an exposure to them, giving the AI literacy, but also preparing them rather than asking them to adapt to the conditions, preparing them to the next course which is likely to come. It's going to be a difficult roadmap because always my mentor used to say, capacity building falls between the two stools. Nobody cares, but there is need for investment, and also that level of investment of time, efforts to understand how we could reach out to them in terms of providing the value that they need at this point in time. Otherwise, we are going to sorely, sadly miss them out in the bus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I think in the interest of time, I'll try to wrap this up very quickly, but a heartfelt thank you to all the panelists as well as speakers and to the expert support centers for making this happen. Thank you so much. And hope we'll continue this effort in the coming year as well with more editions of this, perhaps virtually. Thank you. The next session here, the MEC plenary, is only for members, experts, and invited dignitaries. And if you're not a part of that, or the organizing team would request you to kindly proceed to the other sessions that we have going on, please. Thank you.
Check. Check, one, check this. Check, one, check this. Check, one, check this. Check. Check, one, check this. Check. Check, one, check this. One, check. One, check this. Check, one, check this. One, hello. 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 Check, one, check. Hello. Check, one, check this. Hello. ये तो check, one, check this. Check, one, check this. One, hello. 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 Check, one, check this. One. Hello. Check, one. Check. One, check this. Hello. 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 Check, one. Hello. Check. Hello. Check this. Check, one. Hello. 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 Check. This. Hello. Check. Hello. Check this. Check. One. Check this. Check.
Check, check. This is the audio test. Anurag sir, Michael, can you hear me? This is the audio test on Zoom. Can you hear me? Check. 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 Check.
Hello. No. Okay. I'll do that. Anything for GPAI. We're all fine. We're not moving house. Okay. Can I also ask the AV team to connect it? Thank you. Yeah? We're about to start, so because we will hold this session under Chatham House rules, which is a private session of the experts and the members of GPAI, may I kindly ask people in the room that are not a GPAI expert or a member to please leave the auditorium so that we can start. Thank you so much. We're all fine. So could we please clear the room? Thank you. And may I ask the people in the back bleachers to please leave the room as well? Thank you, Robert. Right on, Robert. Thank you. This is a private session. That's why we need to have it at closed doors. Terribly sorry if people were expecting a public session here. And we would like to start in the next minute. So while everybody finishes, I'm going to test my mic.